Well, I'm John Reuter, and we're in Sandpoint, Idaho. On my 21st birthday, I was on a dock in McCall, which is down in central Idaho. We're up way north now in Idaho, and so we're drinking, obviously, my 21st birthday, and so we decided to start a newspaper up here. And so after that, a few months later, my two partners came up. They started the newspaper. As soon as I finished up at college, I came up to join them. We have a weekly free newspaper that we publish up here now, and that's sort of how I came to be here. I mean, that's part of why we went for it, is that all along the way people kept being so reassuring and saying go for it. And part of why the newspaper works is because we have these columnists who work essentially, if not absolutely for free, because they want to share their voice, and the newspaper's a platform to get their voice out to the community and have that conversation there. And so that's what makes it, that's what makes it work. I was appointed to the city council about 1.5 years ago, and that's been exciting, but it's also been, we've been able to do things that I think are really important. We removed our parking requirements from the downtown, which helped create more walkable neighborhoods. We've done a lot to actually start funding bicycle infrastructure in town. I mean, these things to me are really important. But I think that the more important thing in terms of a personal journey and of an understanding of people is how hard it is to tell people what's really happening. And not because they're disappointed in you, but because there's sometimes not a willingness to listen. And also hearing that your lack of willingness to listen too, and that you're bringing to the dialogue certainly a voice that you want to speak, but too often not the open ears to hear it. And that's been interesting to me, figuring out how to talk about things in ways that let people hear them. That it's not about talking about these details of policy, but about talking about the shared values we have as a community. And if you start from that place of those shared values, then you can get to things on the detail level that really make sense. But if you go to people and you say, let's talk about, I don't care what issue it is, whether it's healthcare or the environment or your neighborhood, right? If you start at that point where you want to talk about, the sidewalks will be 5 feet wide or 4 feet wide, everybody gets really, really angry about that little detail. But if you talk about, we want to have neighborhoods where we talk to each other again, where we see each other again, where we have we want to have a community where people interrelate and talk and conversations happen on the street. Okay, people can say, I buy into that ideal, that's something I want to, and then say, how do we get there together, let's decide. And I think you discover two things. One, people are willing to be part of that conversation then, and two, you come up with better ideas than if you try to just impose your particular solution to the problem. You end up with ideas that are actually a lot more meaningful and a lot more practical, and that actually work better for the people that are there than if I just come in and I just said, well, it needs to be this, this, and this, and just do it this way, which is where I started. And that was I don't think my intention has changed, but understanding more that there's a benefit there, if that makes sense. It's not just about me winning or trying to persuade people to come to my point of view, but it's a process of mutual persuasion. As I've grown up, more and more I've become to believe that it's actually these small local interactions that matter. And it's part of why I see myself as a conservative, is this belief of trying to shift that power back down this way so that the people that are here, where you can have those conversations, because it's a lot easier to have those conversations I was talking about here in Sandpoint than it is back in Washington, D.C. When people are worried about re-election, they're worried about all these things. Here all you have to worry about is your neighbors. Worry about your family, worry about your neighbors. It's a lot easier than the complex political dilemmas that take place back at the Capitol. And the more I've realized, the more I believe that local action is the way to do it. That here in Sandpoint, we can make decisions, and in other small towns like us around the country, and we can share those decisions we make with each other. And in doing that, affect a really, that same sort of dream I had of trying to affect wide areas of area, but that's not where you start. And that the effect actually ends up being more meaningful if you're talking about real people rather than a certain number of people or billions of dollars or trillions of dollars, that you're talking about this block here or these houses here. Our values traditionally have been do what works, and that's the rancher ideal. The rancher ideal is you're out on the ranch, how the heck do I solve this problem? I only have these particular tools, I need to solve the thing. And that's where you saw people being able to work with, like Ted Kennedy's on my mind. Certainly, he just passed away, the other day, and Ted Kennedy was able to work with all these conservative stewards because they weren't interested in trying to beat him. They were interested in this pragmatic approach to trying to figure out a solution. in downtown Sandpoint, we had these parking requirements that required you to build blank number of parking spots when you switch to use inside of a building. So if I had a retail shop and I wanted to turn that space into a restaurant, I had to add 10 parking spots. Well, like a lot of other small downtowns, there was nowhere to put those 10 parking spots. So you have to do one of two things. Either one, give up and not do it. Actually 3 things. B, you can pay a big fee, $10,000 per parking spot. So let's say 5, which is not an unusual number for what we're talking about here. 5 parking spots, $50,000, and you're a small business owner. That's not going to happen. Or 3, you can buy a piece, because you're not getting any value of that. And 3, you could buy a piece of property, knock down a building on it, and put parking there instead, or pave over some green space, or do any of those things. So none of these are particularly desirable results, and none of them actually help solve the problem of what we needed downtown, I believe, which is increased vitality. I think parking's not the problem. I think parking tends to be an excuse, but if you go to the most vibrant places in the world, there's always a parking crisis, right? You go to the middle of New York City, you're not gonna find a parking spot. You go to even downtown Boise in Idaho, if there's, on a good night, there's not a parking spot. And you don't just turn around and go home when you can't find parking. You stay around because it's exciting. So the point was to try to shift that dialogue from trying to create parking to trying to create vibrancy. And so what we did is we actually eliminated those parking requirements in our downtown core. And there have now been 4 different businesses that have been able to open up shop and been able to expand because of eliminating those parking requirements, and be able to do things like put outdoor decks and extend their businesses and grow, or been able to move in and start a business. We'd forced growth to be a bad thing. And I think that that's something that's happening all over the country right now, as we've created these regulations that sort of push us towards a suburban model that makes people be farther apart, that makes people be less able to communicate with each other, that creates communities where people are more disconnected. And I think that's unfortunate. And I think that we do need some regulation to help bring that in too. But the first step is just getting rid of the rules that make it impossible to build nice places. And that's what we had downtown, and that's something I'm really proud of, is able to solve that problem and make it so that, people could be free to make places that people wanted to be. This is what I would really encourage people to do. Find somebody you disagree with to admire. Find somebody who disagrees with you about politics, disagrees with you about what they want out of life, disagrees about, about all sorts of things, and find what is it about that person that has common values that you admire. I think that's where we've really gone wrong as a country, is that we've stopped admiring the people who disagree with us about even one thing, let alone a whole host of things. If they have, but if you have one thing that you disagree with me about, suddenly, sorry, you're just not like me. We just don't have something in common. And I guess that's what I would encourage people to do, is look for role models, because we're not going to solve our problems until we talk to each other honestly. And we're not going to solve our problems until we actually go beyond tolerance to a real respect for the values that we share and the values that we disagree about. The people are coming from a place of honesty. What I'm in the middle of trying to do right now is look at other people and try to really hear them and to really understand where they're coming from. And the end result of there oftentimes is a sense of admiration, or at least of real appreciation for where they're coming from.